In a small town framed by endless fields and worn-down roads, a storm brewed not in the sky but in one man's heart. The sun hung low, casting golden rays over the landscape, yet in a rundown house at the edge of town, darkness loomed. The air was heavy with the scent of cheap whiskey and spilled dreams. Inside, a father cradled his bottle as if it were his last connection to reality. His name was Henry, and the echoes of his laughter had long been replaced by the empty clinking of glass. Across the room, in stark contrast, sat a girl. Her name was Lily, and like the gentle morning dew on grass, she was pure yet fragile. She was soft-spoken and different. Lily was deaf, navigating the world in silence. For her, sounds weren't a symphony, they were whispers of the wind and the rustling of leaves, yet her spirit danced like sunlight through the trees, bright and hopeful. But in Henry's somber haze, Lily was a burden. The pressures of life had choked the man who once held dreams in his hands. Bills piled high, his job slipping through his fingers like sand. That day, for Henry, the drunken stupor led to a dreadful decision. He saw an opportunity, one that would free him from worry, if only for a moment. A rancher named Frank had been asking around for help with his cattle, maybe even a little something else. And in his intoxicated state, Henry saw no wrong in making that transaction. That evening, whispers floated through the house, shadows of desperation looping around Henry like a noose. The rancher was a rugged man, his hands calloused from years of labor. Frank was known for his straightforward ways, and his financial ripples ran deep in the community enough for Henry to think he could drown his troubles with cash. Yet as the night grew dark, a sinister cloud loomed above him, shadowing the decision he was about to make. With a half-drunken vow, Henry stumbled into the living room where Lily played quietly with a tattered doll. Her eyes sparkled like stars, carefree in her vast, silent world. There, amidst the chaos of her father's mind, she caught a glimpse of something, a flicker of fear. She sensed that her father was angry, frustrated, but didn't know how to express it. With simple gestures, she tried to communicate, her tiny hands forming shapes that spoke of love and longing. But Henry was too far gone. That night he straightened himself, brushed the dust from his shabby clothes, and made a life-altering decision. His heart hardened against the innocence of his daughter. In his mind, he believed she'd live a better life on that ranch, away from the bills and the empty bottles. "It's for your own good," he murmured, his voice slurring. The next day, the horizon brightened with the golden tinge of dawn. Lily stood beside her father, unaware of what was unfolding around her. The dirt road led to the ranch where Frank awaited, a grin spreading across his face upon seeing Henry's approach. Money exchanged hands, a short, curt agreement laid out upon the dusty surface of a worn-out table. Henry barely remembered the details, too steeped in his haze to comprehend the gravity of what he had done. With the finality of a cold wind, he turned and walked away, leaving Lily with the rancher. As she stood there, clutching her doll, the reality of her situation began to settle in. Frank, misunderstanding her confusion for ignorance, offered her a smile that turned quickly into a frown as he examined the lack of comprehension in her eyes. He believed her to be a mere mute, destined to follow commands and enjoy the perpetual silence of his farm life. Days turned into weeks, and the ranch life was harsher than what Lily had imagined. Instead of lush meadows and gentle animals, she faced endless chores, merciless days under the glaring sun, and the rough hands of men unaccustomed to dealing with anything but cattle. Yet unbeknownst to them all, Lily's ears began to awaken. The delicate vibrations she had perceived before began morphing into clarity, a sound, a whisper, a beat, a distant call of life around her. She thought as she struggled through her tasks. She was more than just a silent figure. She felt the rhythms of the world, the rustling hay, the lowing of cows, even the distant chime of children's laughter from the nearby town. Each sound painted a picture that life had brushed over her until now. 2 weeks in, during an evening filled with the cries of the cicadas, the ranch fell into a predictable rhythm. Frank stood outside, his voice filled with bitter frustration as he barked at the workers. But that evening, something shifted. Lily's gaze sharpened, her ears tuned into something infinitely more profound than silence. In that moment, every sound bloomed within her. She realized she could hear the jagged edges of his tone, the nuances that revealed anger and annoyance, infused with a hint of desperation. Her heart raced, a wild animal unleashed. She focused, determined to grasp each sound tighter. Weeks passed, and with every day, her awareness expanded like the horizon before her. Events were unfolding, whispers of the ranch's struggles, tales of debts and fading hope. Each evening she caught snippets of conversations, revealing secrets and sorrows that filled those walls. The ranchers tended to gossip and share tales, not knowing she could absorb their words like a sponge. Then came a fateful night. The air was thick, heavy with tension as a storm threatened the skies. A cacophony of sounds filled the air, the thunder rolled like a warning bell. Henry, emboldened by his liquor, appeared at the ranch looking for answers, his anger or perhaps guilt pushing him forward. He shouted, desperation dripping from every syllable. "You can't keep her like this." Lily, hidden just behind a barn, felt the weight of her father's anger wash over her. The rain fell, heavy and relentless, a chaotic symphony against the earth. She stumbled into the light, her heart pounding as clarity flooded her mind. she called, her voice soft yet sure, trembling with raw emotion. In that moment, the world froze. The men fell silent, mouths agape, eyes wide. Henry's laughter staggered into confusion, turning into a deep frown as the realization washed over him, slamming into him like an avalanche. His daughter, his sweet, innocent girl, could hear. Lily took a bold step forward, the thunder of her heartbeat competing with the storm above. She cried, her spirit unfurling. She could finally communicate, no longer bound by silence. For the first time, Henry saw his daughter anew, standing strong, unbroken, despite the circumstances. The years of guilt, shame, and anger weighed heavily upon him, whispered through his stammering lips, but before he could spiral further into chaos, Lily stepped closer, her eyes filled with forgiveness. "You sold me," she said, her voice stronger now, "but I'm still here." Their gazes locked, and for a moment the storm around them faded. In that small space, time stood still. The ranchers watched with bated breath, grappling with the revelation that a girl believed to be lost in silence had found her voice. That night, as thunder cracked like a whip and rain poured from the heavens, a different kind of storm erupted inside Henry. He had to confront the truth behind the bottle that had stolen him away from his daughter for too long. Each raindrop that fell echoed their unspoken words, a reminder of the connection they had lost and the chance to rebuild. Through those dark clouds, glimmers of dawn began breaking, signaling a new chapter. Lily's resilience sparked a flicker of hope in Henry's heart, transforming their relationship in ways he had never thought possible. Love has a unique way of surfacing, even after the deepest scars have formed and the most painful decisions have been made. Together, father and daughter began to bridge their worlds. They spoke, truly spoke, as the storm paused, leaving room for the light to seep through. The ranch became a new home, not just for work, but a space for reconciliation. Conversations flourished, laughter filled the air, intricate and beautiful, a reminder that silence could be shattered. In a world often defined by noise, Lily's journey highlighted a rare truth. Sometimes it takes losing everything to find what truly matters. And through the love of a father and a daughter, even the heaviest heart can learn to sing again. In the dim light of a rundown living room, a stillness hung heavy in the air, wrapping around a father and daughter like a worn blanket. Henry, half buried in his own despair, sat slumped on a threadbare couch, a whiskey bottle gripped tightly in his hand. The room carried the scent of cheap alcohol and broken dreams, reminiscent of a life that had spiraled out of control. He raised the bottle to his lips, drowning his sorrows one sip at a time, while a young girl quietly played at his feet. Her name was Lily. Soft and wide-eyed, she conjured magic from the simplicity of her worn-out toys, a doll, its button eye missing, and a battered teddy bear. For Lily, the world was a swirl of colors and gestures. Silence was not a void, but a canvas upon which she painted her thoughts. She was deaf, but her spirit was alive, flickering like a flame eager to break free. Yet to Henry, her silence was a burden. In moments of desperation, when bill collectors knocked relentlessly and life's pressures collided, he saw his daughter's disabilities not as attributes but as chains that shackled him to his misfortunes. That day, with a toxic mix of alcohol and anger coursing through him, a reckless idea took root in his mind, one that felt like an easy way out. "Maybe it's for the best," he muttered to himself, swirling the whiskey around in its bottle. In a town not far from the rundown house, there lived a rancher named Frank. He was a gruff man, known for his hard work and no-nonsense approach to life. Frank had been looking for some help on his ranch, extra hands to tend to the cattle and keep the place running smoothly. As Henry whiled away his thoughts, his mind danced around an unsettling idea. What if he sold Lily to this rancher? At least out there, she wouldn't be in the way. The thought flickered, then ignited. That night, the air was thick with tension as Henry made his way down that dirt road to Frank's ranch, clutching Lily's tiny hand in his own. Her eyes searched his for understanding, but all she sensed was the unease radiating from him. She tugged at her father, wanting to play, wanting to feel the warmth of their connection. But Henry's heart had grown cold. They arrived at the ranch under the pallid moonlight. As Frank stepped out to greet them, his deep voice rolled over the shadows. With a slurred bravado, fueled by the liquor warming his insides, he blurted, "I need to make some quick cash, Frank." At first, Frank stood stiff with disbelief. He repeated, glancing at the girl who stood silently, oblivious to the weight of the words being exchanged. "Yeah, she's deaf, can't do much, but she's a good worker. Should manage with the livestock," Henry said, confidence laced with desperation. A silence stretched between the men. And then, without a second thought, they struck the deal. The money exchanged hands, Henry only half aware of the grim reality he had just worked out. Lily, feeling the heaviness of her father's heartache, stood there, clutching her doll, unable to grasp what had happened. In her innocent world, she had no concept of being sold or what that meant. She only knew the familiar scent of her father's whiskey and the chill beginning to crawl up her small spine. Once the transaction was complete, Henry turned and walked away, leaving his daughter behind. Every step away from her felt like stepping deeper into a pit of regret and sorrow, yet he continued on, unable to face the truth of his actions. Little did he know, the story unfolding on that ranch was only just beginning. At the ranch, the days were harsh. Frank's world was built on hard labor and rugged demands. Employees worked from dawn till dusk, their bodies worn from toil. And Lily was no exception. She learned quickly that survival in this world meant working hard and keeping her head down. Frank and the workers believed her silence signified ignorance. They yelled orders and commands, none knowing that every word danced through her mind like a melody she had yearned to hear. Somehow, Lily found joy in the rhythm of the ranch, in the lowing of cows, in the whispering grass beneath her small, bare feet. She felt the warmth of the sun and grasped the reality around her, even if the words themselves remained elusive. Each day layered her with the weight of responsibility, but she rose to the occasion, her spirit resilient. She was capable of more than any had imagined. As the weeks rolled on, something unthinkable began to happen. The world around her started unraveling in sound. It began subtly, a low hum, a distant, clumsy rhythm of footsteps trudging through mud, the gentle rustling of hay. Sounds transformed from mere vibrations to a symphony that was all around her. Unbeknownst to Frank and his workers, the girl they thought was mute had slowly begun picking up the nuances of sound. One summer evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, turning everything to gold, Lily overheard a conversation that would change everything. Frank stood outside with another ranch worker, his voice rising and falling in frustration. "That man is driving me insane," he said. Lily leaned closer, her heart racing as not just the words but the sentiment behind them flooded her hearing. Her mind raced, "I can hear them." Weeks flew by, and with the understanding of sounds came confidence. Lily started connecting words to feelings, sounds to objects. The whispers of the wind spoke to her now, harmonizing with her own burgeoning inner voice. And what once felt like isolation turned into a vibrant world full of secrets waiting to be uncovered. But the deeper Lily delved into the sounds around her, the more she understood. She snuck glances into conversations, overheard echoes of struggles, and caught fleeting moments filled with laughter. The ranch was not only Frank's livelihood, but his burden, the debts overwhelming him, the desperation heavy on his shoulders. And then came the night when everything changed. Henry, fueled by desperation and guilt, had returned to the ranch, seeking answers under the cloak of night. He staggered onto the property, his voice thick with liquor. He yelled, his tone gravelly with emotion, "You've taken my daughter." In that moment, Lily's heart dropped. She felt the heat of his anxiety spread through her. Torn between two worlds, she stepped from the shadows and into the moonlight, her eyes fixed on her father. She called out, her voice tremulous yet undeniably clear. Henry froze, the reality of that single sound crashing around him like a tidal wave. There she stood, his daughter, gazing back at him with eyes full of life and understanding. The unforgiving flood of emotions burst over him like a dam breaking. His voice cracked, drowning in disbelief and relief. The workers gathered in a tight knot, jaws dropped and eyes wide, as realization washed over everyone. This girl they had dismissed, they had underestimated, she could hear. The silence wrapped around them shattered in an instant, replaced by a cacophony of astonishment. "She sold me," Lily said, voice steady, "but I can hear now." With those words, an unbreakable connection sparked back to life. Henry stumbled forward, shame clawing at him, while the weight of his decisions crashed down around him like jagged glass. The words spilled forth, heavy laden with a realization he had tried to escape. On that stormy night, as the rain began to fall, a new understanding bloomed between them. It became clear that Lily was more than just a child caught in the darkness of her father's choices. She was a testament to resilience, capable of weathering storms untouched. Henry fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face, releasing the sorrow that had tormented him for so long. "I never meant to hurt you, Lily," but words faltered in the face of his shame. Lily stepped closer. "I know, Dad, but you can't keep running from yourself." Her voice, once a whisper of fear, now carried strength and forgiveness, a reminder that life keeps moving forward even through the wreckage. Over the following weeks, their lives began to intertwine anew. It wasn't easy, there were challenges and hard conversations, but for the first time, Henry faced his demons instead of drowning them. He sought help not just for himself, but for their relationship. Together, they carved out a new life, one where love replaced shame, understanding replaced silence. On that ranch, surrounded by the joy of the cattle and the beauty of the fields, they learned to listen to the world, to each other, and to themselves. Frank, too, changed. He softened, realizing that every worker on his ranch had a story worth hearing. Lily's laughter filled the empty spaces, turning the ranch into a home. The daughter, once thought to be lost, became a beacon of light, guiding her father back from darkness. In a world where words had the power to build or destroy, they found a shared language, one spoken through the heart beyond sound. In the end, it wasn't merely a tale of a sale, but a story of redemption, one where silence was shattered not by rage or sorrow, but by a deep, unwavering love that transformed lives forever. As storms passed and sunlight embraced the land, new growth emerged, flourishing in the soil once deemed barren. And there they stood, united not just as father and daughter, but as two souls rediscovering the strength of their shared bond, ready to confront whatever the world brought their way. In a small, dust-swept town, the sun began to set, bathing everything in an orange hue. Life moved slow here, but sometimes it moved too fast. a father named Henry sat slumped on a tattered couch in a house that seemed to sag under the weight of regret. Bottles lay scattered around him like fallen soldiers, reminders of a battle against life he could never seem to win. He was drowning in his own despair, but in the midst of his chaos, a small figure sat nearby. Lily, his daughter, played quietly with an old teddy bear, its fur threadbare. The little girl was deaf, her world painted in silence, while the rest of the world spun in a cacophony of noise. Yet she glowed with a light that could fill the darkest corners of the heaviest room. To her, the gestures that came from her father's lips were akin to reading a story from a book, the kind that transported her away from their reality. But Henry was lost, locked in a suffocating haze fueled by cheap whiskey and overwhelming guilt. He saw himself failing as a father more with each passing day. It was during one of those bitter, drunken nights that a reckless idea wormed its way into his mind. He whispered to himself, the clinking of glass the only reply. Somebody else could take care of her. That night, under the heavy cloak of darkness, he stumbled to the only place he thought might hold a solution, a ranch owned by a man named Frank, a wiry rancher known for his hardiness and determination. Frank had been asking around for help with his cattle. Maybe he might consider taking on a little girl who wasn't quite right. Henry's heart twisted at the thought, but desperation is a powerful force, and it can dull the sharp edges of morality. The next evening, Henry finally mustered the courage to approach Frank. He arrived at the ranch, the sun sinking low behind him as if it too wanted to escape the weight of his decisions. Frank stood outside, hands on his hips, looking every bit the rugged rancher that he was. Frank asked, his brows furrowing as he eyed the obvious unease swirling around the man. Taking a deep breath, Henry slurred his way through the proposal. "I'm needing some cash. I could let you have my daughter. She can help out here." His voice trailed off, the enormity of what he was suggesting beginning to dawn on him. Frank stared, disbelief etched on his face. "It's not like that," Henry rushed to explain, the whiskey bubbling up his indignation. "She's deaf, doesn't speak." Lily, tucked away behind her father, caught the tension in the air. Her heart raced in confusion as she sensed the crackle of emotion that pulsed around her. She couldn't hear the words, but she could feel their weight like a storm brewing. Frank asked, disbelief blending with concern, but the desperation in Henry's eyes told him everything he needed to know. After a brief, uncomfortable pause, Frank sighed. And just like that, a deal was struck. Henry would hand over his daughter for a sum of money that felt like a lifeline. Just like that, a precious little girl was now seen as an opportunity for someone else. He accepted the cash, not fully aware of the storm he had conjured. Lily, oblivious to the complexities of what had just transpired, looked up at her father, sensing something deeply wrong. She signed, her small hands desperately trying to reach into his world of hurt. Henry turned away, unable to confront the pain etched on her face. He felt as though he was slipping from her grasp, each step away from her a step deeper into his own darkness. Days turned into weeks at the ranch, and the reality of Lily's situation began to unfold. Frank had taken her in, believing her to be mute, a sweet girl who would silently assist with chores. But would she be as docile as he hoped? He hadn't counted on Lily's fire. Every day was a challenge filled with tasks she'd never known how to navigate. She discovered the hard ways of life on a ranch, waking up before dawn, hauling water, feeding livestock, and tending to the chores that never seemed to end. At first, she felt lost in a sea of noise and motion. The ranchers would yell commands at each other, but no one spoke to her. They believed she couldn't understand them, that her world was forever cloaked in silence, but they were mistaken. As weeks rolled on, something magical began to awaken within Lily. The vibrations of the ranch, the soft thud of hooves, the distant calls of cows, and even the wind rustling through the tall grass started to coalesce into something more than mere sensations. Each sound morphed into a reality that began to form connections in her mind. One evening, during a particularly hectic shift, Frank stood outside, the sun dipping low. He was beside a worker, venting frustration about the ranch's financial struggles. "If that man thinks I'm giving in, he's in for a rude awakening," Frank exclaimed, anger seeping into his tone. Lily stood nearby, wiping her hands on her worn pants, her heart pounding. She instinctively turned toward them, her mind racing. She thought, days turned into weeks, and with every passing moment, her comprehension expanded. The ranch felt like a labyrinth where fools joked and laughed, unaware of the girl who absorbed every sound, every whispered secret, and every heavy sigh. She began to learn the truth hidden beneath words about the struggles of the ranch, the worries of her father, and the lives of those around her. And then came that fateful night miles away. Henry's life lay in shambles shaped by the desperation that had once guided his choices. He had drank his way through the days, but guilt began to gnaw at him like a feral beast. That weekend, he stumbled back towards the ranch, fueled by a mix of regret and regret. He mumbled to himself as he staggered through the dirt. He was a hollow version of the man he once was, lost and broken, and there she was, a walking reminder of everything he had given up. He cried as he approached the ranch, his heart racing. Lily, she had overheard him arriving, her heart pounding as she sensed the swirling emotions enveloping her father. She dashed outside, her newfound confidence taking hold. "Dad," she shouted, her voice trembling but steady. In that moment, time seemed to freeze. Henry's eyes widened, disbelief mounting as he looked at his daughter standing before him, alive and vibrant, her spirit shimmering under the starlit sky. He breathed, as if saying her name could dissolve the void he had created. She insisted again, but this time the words came pouring out like a waterfall, cascading into the spaces they had long neglected. His heart raced as he approached, each step a battle against his regrets. Wrapping his arms around her, he pulled her close, and in that moment, everything that had once felt shattered began to mend. Lily pulled back to look him in the eyes, her own glistening with strength. The first time, the world around them felt smaller, as if in that embrace they were the only ones that mattered. Frank stood at a distance, watching the scene before him. He sensed the remarkable bond cementing right before his eyes. In the days that followed, Henry achingly picked up the pieces of his life. He listened as Lily shared the truths she had unraveled, opening a door to their relationship that had once been locked tight. She began, her voice unsteady but brave. Every word between them held weight. Conversations unfurled like petals blooming after a long winter. They forged a connection anew, a bridge built on understanding, forgiveness, and love. The ranch transformed too, reflecting the shift in Henry. Where once there was tension, laughter now filled the air. Frank welcomed the change, helping Henry back on his feet while teaching him the value of a strong community. Lily started to find her place, no longer the child silenced by others' misconceptions, as did Henry. He faced his demons, both external and internal, and emerged strengthened rather than weakened. They worked side by side, sharing laughs and stories, cooking meals, and watering the fields together. The ranch became their home, rich with new memories forged in love. In the end, the story unfolded not merely as a tale of desperation and chaos, but as a testament to resilience. Lily blossomed, her voice becoming a melody of hope and courage in a world that had once turned its back on her. And through her journey, Henry, too, transformed from a man lost in his own shadows into a beacon of love, willing to reclaim the light for his daughter. Together, they carved out their lives anew, not just as father and daughter, but as partners ready to forge ahead, ready to embrace whatever came next. In a world defined by silence, they embraced the beauty of sound, a reminder that love, once lost, can always be found again. In the dim light of a rundown house, shadows danced on the walls as an overwhelming silence enveloped the little girl and her father. The air was thick with the heavy scent of whiskey, hanging like a cloud over everything. Henry, a once bright man, now a hollow shell, sat slumped with a bottle cradled in his hands. He hardly noticed when his daughter Lily crept closer, her eyes filled with innocence and confusion. Lily was deaf, navigating a world painted in silence. She sensed the tension around her, but it was a language she couldn't quite grasp. Her small fingers played with her favorite doll, the fabric worn and frayed, just like her father's patience. To her, each day was a mystery, but her spirit shone brightly in the darkness, a flicker of hope in a dim, hopeless existence. But to Henry, she was a burden, an anchor dragging him deeper into despair. The weight of unpaid bills and lost dreams pressed heavily on his shoulders, and in his drunken haze he dreamed of escape. It was on one of those dark nights, consumed by swirling clouds of liquor and regret, that a shocking idea took root in his mind. He whispered to himself, staring blankly at the wall. Just a few miles down the road was a ranch owned by Frank, a hard-bitten man who worked tirelessly under the endless sky. Frank had been looking for extra help. Maybe Henry could offer Lily as a solution, one desperate father's sacrifice that could lighten his load, even if just for a moment. With heart racing and a stomach churning with guilt, Henry made his way to Frank's ranch the very next day. The late afternoon sun illuminated the dirt road, casting long shadows that felt ominous. He found Frank outside, a rugged figure against the backdrop of the sprawling fields. Frank asked, frowning slightly, sensing something was off. Looking to make a deal, Henry slurred, words tumbling out before he could think them through. Frank's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. "Sell your daughter? She's deaf, can't do much, but she could work here. Hands to help with the cattle," Henry rambled, desperation and alcohol mixing dangerously in his voice. Lily, standing small behind her father, sensed the weight of what was happening but couldn't understand the words. Tears welled in her eyes, a silent plea echoing in her heart. Frank paused, squinting at Henry. Before long, a transaction was made, cash exchanged for a life. Henry felt shattered inside as he accepted the money, his soul crumbling with every second. But facing his daughter, he shoved aside the gnawing doubts in his mind and turned to leave, walking away as if she were just an object, rather than his flesh and blood. Days turned to weeks at Frank's ranch, and the reality of their broken lives began to unfold. Lily quickly learned that ranch work was grueling and relentless. With each task feeding the cattle, hauling water, cleaning stalls, she realized this was not a refuge but a new form of servitude. Frank, believing her to be unable to understand, barked orders at her like she was simply another piece of livestock. He would shout, unaware of the intelligence shining in her eyes. To him, Lily was just a silent entity, a means to help ease the pressure of running the ranch, but she was so much more. As days passed, something remarkable began to happen. The world shifted. Lily started to pick up on the rhythmic vibrations surrounding her, the rustling of hay, the distant mooing of cows, and even the faint murmurs of conversations. Each sound, once a mere whisper of vibration, began to weave together, a tapestry of connection that slowly revealed the language of life around her. Then one fateful evening, while finishing her chores under a golden sunset, Lily overheard a conversation that lit a fire in her heart. Frank stood outside talking to another ranch hand, frustration stretching his face. "If that man thinks I'm going to keep bending over backward for him, he's got another thing coming," he said harshly. Lily's eyes widened as she grasped the sounds drifting to her. Each fragment of speech was a beating heart, pulsating with emotion. In that moment, she felt an awakening, the realization that even without her hearing, she could understand the essence of what was being said. With newfound courage, Lily began to step into her power. No longer the silent girl in the shadows, she threw herself into the work at the ranch, her resolve igniting a spark in her spirit. Days turned into months, and with each passing day, she grew stronger, finding joy in the tasks thrown at her, even while the men still underestimated her. But then there came a night of reckoning, one that would shatter the illusions surrounding them all. Henry, haunted by what he had done, came to the ranch, desperate to see his daughter again. He was largely consumed by regret, guilt wrapped around him like a cold blanket. "Frank," he bellowed as he stumbled into the yard, anger and pain simmering just below the surface. He had tried to drown the memories in whiskey, but they kept clawing their way back. The moment he spoke, Lily felt a deep electric pulse run through her. She rushed outside, a whirlwind of emotions overwhelmed her. The instant she laid eyes on her father, something clicked into place. Her voice rang out strong and clear, cracking like thunder against the night sky. Everything froze. Henry's heart stopped, disbelief flooding his system. "Lily," his breath caught in his throat, and he took a step closer, eyes wide with a mix of joy and confusion. She beamed, her eyes dancing with excitement. The shock of it reverberated through the night like the swell of a tide. Stunned, Frank stood by, arms crossed, watching as the impossible unfolded before him. Henry blurted, kneeling in front of his daughter, desperately seeking answers. The world around them fell silent, overridden by their shared moment, their shattered connection, once thought lost forever. Instead of cowering, Lily stood tall. "I always could," she stated, voice steady. Her words pierced through Henry's thick veil of sorrow. I thought I lost you," he stammered. The pain of realization crashed over him like a wave, pulling him under. Tears streamed down Lily's cheeks, a mixture of hurt and determination. "You thought you were helping me, but I'm still here and I'm not going anywhere." Each word fell from her lips like a declaration, defiant and unapologetic. Something shifted within Henry as he listened to his daughter's unyielding spirit. He remembered the little girl who brought light to his world, the child he had unknowingly sold out of fear and desperation. In this moment, he faced the truth he had buried. He needed to change. He whispered, heart pounding in his chest. Lily stepped closer, wiping her tears with determination. "I already have Dad, but it's not just me who you need to face." As the stars blinked overhead, both father and daughter stood amidst the turmoil of their shared past, two souls reconciling in the glow of newfound clarity. Around them, Frank watched, realizing the depths of emotion that had unfolded. In that moment, the ranch transformed from a place of bondage to something more, a possibility for healing. They began to mend the broken pieces, not just as father and daughter, but as individuals. Henry dug deep, slowly uncovering the roots of his pain and addiction. He sought help, joining a support group to face his demons. It was not a straight path, there were stumbles along the way, but with Lily by his side, the journey became a little easier. The bond between them reformed under the warmth of love and understanding, blossoming brightly in the light of second chances. Days turned into weeks, and the ranch began to pulse with a different energy. Laughter echoed against the backdrop of daily chores as workers shared stories, discovering the strength of vulnerability. Frank, too, embraced the changes. It was like witnessing a miracle unfold. Lily found her place on the ranch, not just as a helper, but as a vibrant part of the community. No longer viewed as a liability, she became a beacon of resilience. The rhythms of life pulsed through her, awakening the spirits of those around her. And as for Henry, he transformed. No longer just a man filled with regret, he became a father who fought for his daughter every single day, who celebrated the small victories, who stood by her in the shadows, cheering her on into the light. In a world often defined by loss, they discovered a love that served as an unwavering anchor amidst chaos. It became a symbol, a reminder that silence could no longer drown out their voices. Together, father and daughter redefined their lives and their relationship, carving a new path filled with promise. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the ranch, the laughter echoed, carrying on the wind. Henry and Lily stood side by side, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. They were together, united not just by blood, but by healing, a testament to the power of love, resilience, and redemption. In the end, their lives intertwined as a beautiful tapestry, woven from the threads of hardship, loss, and ultimately hope. And it was here, in this sprawling land of possibilities, that both of them found their voices, learning that sometimes the greatest journeys lead us home. In the haze of a living room filled with shadows, a small girl sat on the worn-out carpet, clutching a frayed doll. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the faint smell of whiskey in the air, swirling like the thoughts in her father's head. He sat across the room on a battered couch, the blue glow of the television flickering over his face, illuminating a man lost in despair. Henry's eyes were glassy, not just from the alcohol, but from the crushing weight of his life. He felt himself disappearing, drowning in a sea of regret and bad decisions. The girl signed, her hands moving delicately, forming words only she could speak. Her name was Lily, and she was deaf. The silence around her was both a shield and a prison, enveloping her in a world that often felt alien. While she played quietly, she couldn't help but sense the tension hanging over them like a storm cloud. But to Henry, who had been drowning his pain for far too long, that little girl represented everything he couldn't face. For him, being a father had turned into a burden he wasn't sure he could bear anymore. Late that night, pushed by a tidal wave of whiskey and desperation, Henry pulled himself up from the couch. With unsteady legs, he walked down the dirt road to the one place he thought might offer relief: Frank's ranch. Frank was a hard man, a no-nonsense rancher known for his rugged demeanor and an iron will. He had been looking for help around the ranch, and in Henry's foggy mind, a bargain began to form. Maybe he could sell his daughter. As Henry approached Frank's sprawling property under the pale moonlight, doubt crept in. Yet the knocking of desperation drowned out the whispers of regret. Frank came out, arms crossed, observing the disheveled man before him. Frank asked, brow furrowing with concern. With slurred words, Henry blurted, "I'm offering my daughter. I need cash." Lily stood behind him, her small hands trembling, not understanding the weight of her father's words, but sensing the gravity of the situation. She glanced up at him, confusion etched across her young face as if trying to decipher a language lost to her. Frank paused, disbelief mingling with something else: concern, perhaps. "You can't be serious." Henry's eyes darted around, locking onto the money in Frank's pocket as desperation increased. He gave a curt nod. "It's for the best. You can do something useful with her." They struck a deal that night, and with each bill exchanged, the enormity of what he was doing washed over Henry in gusts. But he pushed the feeling aside, turning away from Lily, who stood small and confused in the darkness. He walked away, leaving the most precious part of his life behind, as if she were nothing more than a burden he couldn't bear. In the days that followed, life took on a new rhythm on the ranch. For Lily, the change was dizzying. She found herself among strangers, surrounded by rough hands and loud voices. Frank glanced at her as he attempted to give her chores, unaware that she absorbed every sound, every vibration like a sponge. At first, she felt lost, and it was clear that the men treated her as merely another set of hands, rather than a real person filled with feelings and hopes. Frank called, thinking she couldn't hear. But inside, Lily felt a storm brewing each time his voice hit her ears. Even if the words were garbled, their emotions washed over her like waves. Each shout was a reminder of her father's betrayal, clawing at the wall she had built to protect herself from feeling too deeply. Yet as days turned to weeks, Lily discovered something miraculous. She began to awaken to the sounds around her. The rumbling of the earth, the rustle of leaves, even the distant mooing of cows became a symphony that resonated within her. For the first time, her silence transformed into something more: a way to connect, to feel the world come alive. One evening, as the sun dipped low, its golden hues painting the sky, she overheard Frank speaking with another ranch hand. "If that man thinks I'm going to keep letting him push me around, he's in for a rude awakening," Frank said, frustration spilling over. Lily's heart raced. She felt the pulse of every word vibrate through her. Could it be? Was she actually hearing them? Confusion fused with excitement. She felt a fire ignite within her, a realization that she wasn't trapped in silence after all. The next day, Lily embraced her work with a newfound vigor. She became faster, stronger, adapting to her environment while learning the intricacies of ranch life. The men soon realized there was more to her than they had initially thought. She could wrangle horses and mend fences, her confidence blossoming like the wildflowers that dotted the fields. But Frank understood the deeper emotional undercurrent in those around him. He began to notice Lily's tenacity and strength. Conversations shifted, laughter filled the air, and he started treating her not as a mute girl, but as an integral part of his team. Her spirit took flight, and she gradually became one of the family. However, deep in the recesses of her heart, Lily still felt the loss of her father. What was once a cloud of disappointment slowly turned to affection, even forgiveness. She held on to the hope that one day he would realize the gravity of his actions. One fateful night, Henry, feeling the weight of his choices pressed down on him, decided to return to the ranch. The whiskey had faded, replaced by a burning guilt that forced him to confront what he had done. With every step, visions of Lily flashed before him, the little girl who had trusted him. He yelled as he stumbled through the ranch gates, his voice heavy with desperation. Lily's heart raced as she felt him draw near. She ran outside, her pulse quickening, hope tangible in the air. She called out, unsure what she would feel: anger, sadness, or love. Henry froze the moment he saw her. They locked eyes, the world around them faded into the background. In that instant, the realization crashed over him like a tidal wave. His daughter stood before him, unharmed but strong, more resilient than he had ever given her credit for. She shouted, her voice breaking the silence that had surrounded their relationship for so long. Every breath Henry took felt like 1,000 emotions colliding within him. In that moment, the weight of his choices drew him down to his knees. He whispered, his heart shattering. "I forgive you, Dad," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "But you need to forgive yourself." The sincerity in her words shattered the chains of regret that had bound him for so long. As Henry pulled her close, the barriers he had built around his heart began to crack. "I never meant to hurt you," he cried. The floodgates opened. Lily patted his back, drawing strength from their shared moment. "You can learn. We can fix this," she said softly, embracing him tighter. Frank watched as a father and daughter reconnected, realizing they were both healing in a way that could never be undone. The ranch became a sanctuary, allowing love and forgiveness to blossom amidst their past missteps. Days passed, and their bond strengthened. They embarked on a new journey together. Henry faced his demons head-on, joining support groups and taking the necessary steps to rebuild his life. He realized that being a father required more than just providing. It involved healing wounds and acknowledging the pain that had festered within him for so long. Lily thrived in her surroundings, becoming a symbol of strength and resilience. She took on chores as if they were her own personal conquests. Day by day, she transformed from the silent girl lost in a whirlwind of confusion to a spirited young girl who defined her narrative with strength and beauty. As the seasons changed, so did the ranch. The air filled with laughter and the days echoed with voices, vibrant and alive. Frank embraced his role as a mentor, nurturing both Henry and Lily. Together, they forged a family born from a blend of acceptance and determination. It was later one spring morning as they strolled through the fields that Henry turned to look at Lily, the sun catching the glint of her smile. "I'm so proud of you," he said, his voice steady. "I'm proud of you too, Dad," she replied, beaming. In that moment, the ranch became something more than a place. It transformed into a home, their sanctuary, where they had finally learned to speak each other's language. It was here that they found the beauty of forgiveness could reshape their futures, allowing healing to flow from their broken places. As they walked side by side, the sky stretched endlessly above them, filled with the promise of tomorrow. Every step marked their path forward, redefining what it meant to love and be loved. Amidst the sprawling hills, they breathed life into one another, forging ahead with the understanding that their story was just beginning. Together, they would navigate through the whispers of the past, united by a bond that could weather any storm. In the end, it wasn't just about a father who had sold his daughter or a girl who was thought to be silent. It was about the journey toward healing, resilience, and the unbreakable ties that formed when love was reclaimed from the darkness. In the dim light of a rundown living room, shadows flickered against peeling wallpaper, and the strong scent of whiskey hung heavily in the air. On a sagging couch, Henry sat hunched over, a half-empty bottle cradled in his hands, eyes glazed and distant. He was lost in a fog of regret and despair, a man who had let the weight of life crush him under its relentless pressure. On the floor nearby, a little girl named Lily played quietly, her fingers tracing the worn fabric of her favorite doll. Lily was deaf, moved through a world of silence that she navigated with grace. She didn't know the weight of her father's burdens, but she could sense the tension in the air. Every sigh he let escape, every frown etched on his face, spoke to her in a language she felt even if she couldn't hear. She signed, her tiny hands moving quickly, trying to capture his attention. But Henry, drowning in his drink, hardly noticed her. His heart ached with the crushing responsibilities of life, the bills piled high, his job only a fading echo. The thought slithered through his mind like a serpent. What if I let her go? The idea took root and grew in the dark corners of his mind. Maybe someone else could care for her, give her what she truly needed. Maybe she'd be better off without him. It was a treacherous thought, but after another swig from the bottle, it felt like a solution. That evening, Henry made his way to Frank's ranch, a man he had known in passing but didn't truly know at all. Frank was a hardworking rancher, his sun-kissed skin etched with the stories of long hours and hard work. He was looking for help, and Henry thought he could offer just that, his daughter. As he stumbled onto the ranch under a fading sky, the sun sinking low and casting long shadows, Henry's heart raced, not just from the alcohol, but from the gravity of what he was about to do. Frank stepped out to greet him, hands on his hips, scanning the dilapidated man before him. Frank asked, suspicion flickering in his dark eyes. "I've got an offer," Henry said, the words slurring as he continued. "I need some cash. I want to sell my daughter to you." Lily stood behind him, clutching her doll, sensing the shift, her heart heavy with confusion. She didn't understand what was happening, but she felt the shadows of fear swirling around her father. Frank looked at Henry, disbelief written all over his face. "Are you serious?" "It's not like that," Henry insisted, his voice shaky. "I'm just trying to make things easier." Henry's desperation dripped from his words, and Frank, sensing the man's turmoil but not fully understanding it, paused. He finally asked, the indifference in his tone not masking the gravity of the situation. They struck a deal that night, an exchange made under clouds heavy with unspoken fears. A few bills slid from Henry's hand into Frank's, and with each dollar, Henry felt a piece of himself slip away, a realization that he was losing the most precious part of his life without truly comprehending the full extent of his actions. As he turned to leave, Lily watched him go, her tiny heart breaking. She signed, a plea echoing in the silence, but he didn't turn back. He walked away, leaving her behind with the man she didn't know. The ranch quickly became a whirlwind of new faces and grueling work. Lily was thrust into a life she hadn't chosen. Frank and his workers viewed her as another pair of hands, someone to help with the unrelenting chores. "Come on, girl," they would yell, unaware that the girl standing before them was more than just silent. At first, Lily felt lost, confused amidst the shouts and orders. Words flew around her like arrows, and she didn't know how to catch them. But as days turned into weeks, something remarkable happened. The world around her began to come alive. The vibrations of hoofbeats, the rustling of hay, and even the whispers of the wind filled her senses. One evening, as she worked under a vast sky, she overheard Frank talking to another worker about the ranch's troubles. "If he thinks I'm going to keep bending over for him, he's got another thing coming," Frank said, his voice booming like thunder. Lily felt her heart race. Could it be was she actually hearing these words? The realization spread through her like wildfire. She wasn't as alone as she thought. The echoes of sound had transformed into a language that spoke directly to her heart. With this newfound understanding, she threw herself into her tasks with vigor. Lily started to catch on quickly, finding joy in the routines of ranch life. She began to excel at her chores, her spirits lifting with every small victory. The men who once saw her as a burden started to notice her tenacity. She felt like part of something, an important piece of a larger puzzle. Each day, she harnessed her strength, eager to prove herself amid a sea of noise and chaos. However, beneath the surface, the sting of her past lingered. Though she made strides in her new life, the threads of her previous existence with Henry tugged at her heart. Perhaps he would come back, perhaps he would see her again. Little did she know that was a thought that weighed heavily on Henry, too. One evening, once more drowning in regret and sorrow, Henry found himself sitting in a dimly lit bar, wrestling with the choices he had made. He stared into his drink, haunted by the memories of his daughter laughing, playing, being the light that had once illuminated his dark world. He whispered, his voice trembling. The bartender glanced over and offered a sympathetic ear, but Henry didn't need comfort, he needed clarity. That night he made his decision. He had to confront his past, had to confront himself. "I'm going back," he muttered, determination simmering beneath the layers of shame. The next day, Henry returned to the ranch, heart pounding as he stepped through the gates. The ranch was bustling with activity, and in the distance he caught sight of Lily, her laughter floating through the air like a sweet melody. For the first time in months, his heart surged with hope. Henry shouted, his voice loud enough to carry through the hustle of the workers. Lily turned at the sound and froze, her eyes wide. She shouted, running past the cattle and dust, her face lighting up with joy as she sprinted toward him. The moment their eyes locked, something shifted. The heaviness that had once clouded their relationship began to lift. Henry fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face as he wrapped his arms around her. "I thought I lost you," he whispered, voice breaking. Lily stepped back, still holding onto his arms. "You didn't lose me, I'm right here." Her eyes sparkled, and for the first time she felt strength radiate from being reunited with the man she loved. In that moment, everything changed. The past could no longer hold them captive. Frank stood nearby, his jaw dropping in disbelief. The girl he had thought was simply a mute child had a voice, one that broke through the silence with a fierce clarity. The world around them felt different now, like sunlight pushing away clouds that had hung for too long. Henry gasped, processing the realization that she was not the burden he had thought her to be. She was a beacon of resilience, a child who had thrived despite his failures. As the three of them stood together, emotions began to overflow, filling the spaces that had once felt hollow. Henry realized it was never too late for redemption or a fresh start. His daughter was alive, her spirit unbroken, and he was determined to learn how to be the father she deserved. In the days that followed, Henry sought to mend the wounds he had created. He joined support groups and worked hard to confront his demons. Lily, with her vibrant spirit, became his light, guiding him back from the brink. She accepted him back into her life, slowly teaching him the true meaning of forgiveness. She smiled, "You're not alone." The bond they forged became stronger, illuminating the path forward. They both learned to navigate through their pain, facing the turbulent waters of their past head-on together, hand in hand. On the ranch, Frank turned out to be not just an employer, but an ally, guiding Henry in rebuilding his life. Together they worked side by side, forming a kinship built upon the shared understanding of hardship and healing. As seasons changed, so did the landscape of their lives. Together, they created a refuge filled with laughter, joy, and new beginnings. The ranch transformed into a home, one that radiated warmth and kinship, a sanctuary from the struggles of the outside world. And through all the trials, Lily continued to flourish, the little girl who had once been dismissed blossoming into a formidable young woman. She stood tall among her peers, her courage infectious and her laughter ringing clear and true. There was a day later on when she looked at her father with an earnestness that stopped him in his tracks. "You know, I always believed in you," she said, her voice steady and filled with profound sincerity. Henry took a deep breath, pride swelled in his chest. "The strength you've shown has taught me so much." As the sun dipped low, casting golden rays across the ranch, they stood together in the field as family, capturing the light that filled the world around them. It was more than just a place, it was a symbol of their journey, a testament to resilience, love, and the relentless power of forgiveness. In the end, the story of a drunk father who had sold his deaf daughter became one of triumph over despair, a tale redefined by love and the second chances that life so generously provides. They had turned the darkest chapters of their lives into a narrative rich with hope, proving that no matter how lost one might feel, the path back to one's self is always there, waiting to be walked hand in hand. In a small, dusty town enveloped by wide-open fields, shadows stretched long as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Inside a dilapidated house, a storm was brewing, not in the skies, but within the heart of a father. Henry sat in the dim light, slumped in a rickety chair, the remnants of a whiskey bottle clutched tightly in his hand. His eyes were glazed, each sip deepening a chasm of sorrow. The air was thick with the stench of liquor and neglect. In the corner, a young girl played alone, oblivious to the chaotic emotions swirling around her. Her name was Lily, and she was deaf. Lily's world was a vivid tapestry of colors and shapes, but she often felt the weight of silence pressing down around her. She played softly with her tattered doll, unaware of the turmoil that her father was facing. She didn't understand the concept of despair, but she could feel her father's frustration wrapping around him like a suffocating blanket. She signed, her small hands moving with the grace of someone trying to bridge a chasm of absence. But Henry barely acknowledged her. In his mind, he was trapped, the words swirling like leaves in a furious wind. Thoughts raced through his alcohol-clouded brain, thoughts of failure, of bills stacked high, and of lost dreams. Then came the reckless thought, what if I let her go? That idea took root, digging deeper with each swig of whiskey. Maybe someone else could take care of her. Maybe she'd be better off. It was a dark thought, but it felt like an escape. He couldn't face the burden he now carried. Fueled by desperation, he stumbled down the road to Frank's ranch. Frank was a man known for his rough edges and hard work, someone who wouldn't ask too many questions. As Henry approached the ranch, the sun dipped lower, casting shadows that seemed to crawl with the weight of his choice. Frank called out, his voice deep and unwavering. "I'm offering my daughter," Henry said, each word slurred, the weight of his decision pressing down like a lead balloon. "I need some quick cash. She can help out around here. She's deaf, can't really do much," but Frank's brows furrowed, a mixture of disbelief and concern flickering in his eyes. "You want to sell your daughter?" With each harsh word, Henry felt his determination falter, but the thought of relief from his burdens urged him on. "Look," he said, "I'm just trying to make things right." Behind him, Lily stood small and frightened, clutching her doll as tears welled up in her eyes. She sensed the coldness in the air, saw the flicker of worry crossing her father's face, but she didn't understand why. Frank finally replied, voice steady but filled with an unspoken tension, and just like that, the deal was struck. Henry felt a piece of his soul slip away with each bill exchanged, but the desperate hunger for relief drowned out the cries of his conscience. He turned and walked away, leaving behind the most beautiful part of his life, his little girl. At the ranch, life was different. The days stretched long and hard under the unforgiving sun. Lily was now a part of a world she never chose, one filled with strangers who yelled and shouted, barking orders that sounded like foreign words. One ranch hand would shout, not realizing the girl standing before him could feel the vibrations of his voice ripple through the ground beneath her. At first, she felt lost, disoriented amid the clamor. But as the days crawled by, something remarkable began to happen. The world around her became more than mere vibrations. It transformed into a language all its own. She felt the pulse of the ranch under her feet, the distant bawling of cows, the creaking of wood, and the flapping of barn doors. Each sound began to weave together a tapestry of understanding. And slowly but surely, the silence that had once cocooned her began to lift. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold over the ranch, Lily overheard Frank speaking with his workers. "If that man thinks I'm going to keep bending over backwards for him, he's got another thing coming," Frank snapped, voice dripping with frustration. Lily's heart raced. She focused, suddenly tuning into every word she could understand. Each syllable held meaning, pulsing through her like the beats of a drum. In that moment, she realized she was not as lost as she thought. Rather, she had begun to hear the world in a way she had never understood before. With this new light, Lily threw herself into her tasks. Where once she had felt out of place, she began to flourish. She became adept at managing the cows, helping with chores, and picking up the scattered pieces of ranch life. Frank began to recognize her grit, the fire within her spirit sparking a change in how he saw her. Yet beneath the surface, Lily still grappled with the absence of her father. The memory of him haunted her like a faint echo, a reminder of the love and warmth that had once filled her life. She wanted to understand why he had left, why he had sold her. As summer rolled on and the days grew hotter, the ranch thrived and Lily carved out a place for herself. Despite the hard work, laughter spilled through the fields each day like the sun spilling over the horizon. Frank, seeing Lily's determination, began to treat her as part of the team, no longer just a silent girl but a valued member. Then came a night when everything changed. Alone in her room, she decided to write a letter to her father. She poured her feelings onto the page, longing for a connection that felt snatched away. "Dad, I miss you," she wrote. Back in town, Henry sat in a bar, nursing his regrets like the last dregs of a drink. The bartender approached him, concern etched across her face. The moment those words tumbled from his lips, they struck him like a lightning bolt. The gravity of his choice hit him with the ferocity of a storm, unraveling the fabric of his justification. Returning to the ranch had become a weight he couldn't ignore, so he decided he would confront the reality of his actions. He had to find Lily and make things right one way or another. The following morning, Henry found himself driving down the familiar dirt road, sky-heavy with clouds that threatened rain. His heart raced with a mix of fear and hope. Each bump in the road felt like a heartbeat, echoing the urgency of his mission. As he pulled into the ranch, dread filled his chest. Would Frank even let him see her? Would she forgive him? With every step, memories of their moments together flooded his mind, her laughter, her gentle touch, the way her eyes sparkled with joy. He called, his voice shaky. Frank appeared at the barn door, leaning against the frame, arms crossed, eyes wary. "I want to see my daughter," Henry stammered, desperation creeping into his voice. "I need to apologize." Frank scrutinized him for a moment, assessing whether he truly understood the weight of his actions. "You sold her, Henry. You walked away like she didn't matter." "More than you know," Henry replied, heart racing. "I thought I was making the right choice. I thought I was helping her." Just then, Lily emerged from the barn and time seemed to halt. Her eyes locked onto his, confusion flickering across her features before she broke into a smile. She signed, rushing forward, the fear and worry from earlier melting away as she reached out for him. The moment their fingers touched, electricity surged between them. "I'm so sorry, Lily," Henry choked out. "I was lost. I thought I could make everything better, but I didn't." Lily shook her head, steadfast in her belief. "You're here now." As Henry kneeled before her, the flood of emotion washed over him. "I will always love you." Lily smiled through her tears, the connection between them reigniting the fire of their bond that had flickered but never fully extinguished. Frank, witnessing the profound moment between father and daughter, felt the shift. He stepped closer, allowing the healing process to unfold. "You both need to understand it's not enough to just say you'll change." In that moment, Henry nodded, determination flooding his veins. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was committed to becoming the father Lily not only deserved, but needed. Days turned into weeks, and a remarkable transformation began. Henry found work on the ranch, proving his worth alongside Lily. Together, they struggled, laughed, and learned, weaving their lives back together like old yarn into something vibrant and beautiful. The ranch took on new life, no longer just a place for hard labor, but a sanctuary filled with warmth and connection. Frank became a mentor to Henry while nurturing a bond with Lily. Through the unrelenting efforts of the three, healing became more than wishful thinking. It was a living, breathing force. In quiet moments, Henry and Lily would sit together at sunset, sharing dreams and fears. "One day, I want to explore the world," Lily said one evening, looking out over the fields. Henry smiled softly. "Then we'll do it together." As the months passed, Lily flourished, not just in strength, but in spirit. The little girl who had once been sold grew into a young woman who understood the value of family. She thrived under the love and encouragement that surrounded her, sprouting like wildflowers in the unforgiving landscape. And as Henry walked with her down the sunlit path, he finally understood what it meant to be a father. He had faced his demons and emerged transformed, all thanks to the connection he had rekindled with his daughter. It was there, against the backdrop of the vast ranch and endless sky, that Lily stood by his side, resilient and strong. Together, they had faced their past and emerged reborn, prepared for whatever lay ahead. In life's unpredictability, they discovered that love can heal even the deepest wounds. And it was through the power of family, through understanding, forgiveness, and resilience that they navigated their journey, proving that no matter how dark the path may seem, there is always a way back to the light. In a dimly lit living room of a rundown house, the air was thick with tension and the smell of whiskey. A disheveled figure slouched on a faded couch, the flickering television offering the only light in the room. Henry, a father whose world had crumbled, stared blankly at the screen, his mind clouded by despair and sorrow. His heart beat heavy within him, weighed down by the choices he had made, the life he was failing to live. On the floor, a small girl played quietly, her hands dancing over the tattered fabric of an old doll. Her name was Lily. At only 8, she was soft and full of innocent wonder, but she was also deaf. In her world of silence, she created vibrant stories with her toys, unaware of the chaos lurking just beyond her fantasies. She melded with the colors and shapes around her, where sound didn't exist, yet life unfolded in bright, joyous flashes. Lily signed, her fingers moving in hopeful, fluid motions, trying to connect with the man who seemed so lost, but Henry didn't respond. His heart twisted painfully at the sight of her, the little girl he loved more than anything, yet felt burdened by. Just the thought of her made him feel overwhelmed. In his drunken haze, he was consumed by one dark idea after another as they spiraled down into the abyss. That night, with a heart heavy in decisions made under the influence of alcohol, Henry stumbled his way to a nearby ranch, a place owned by Frank, a hard man with rugged hands and a fierce reputation. Frank had been known to take in workers, and in Henry's mind, maybe he could offer Lily as a solution to his problems. Frustration churned within Henry, a desperate thought he could not shake. Under the pale moonlight, he approached Frank's ranch, the gravel crunching under his feet as the distant sounds of livestock filled the air. It felt wrong, yet exhilaration tingled in his veins. The night sky, star-studded and vast, seemed to mirror the emptiness in his heart. Standing there, he could finally see his way out of the dark tunnel he had found himself in. Frank asked when he spotted him, his brow furrowing with a mix of suspicion and genuine concern. "I need to make some fast cash," Henry replied, bravado slipping through his words like water through his fingers. "I want to sell my daughter. She's deaf, can't really do much." The incredulity in Frank's eyes was palpable. "It's not like that," Henry insisted, desperation spilling over as he continued. "She's a good worker." Lily stood behind him, a small figure lost in the shadows, clutching her doll. She felt the tumult of emotions swirling around her: fear, confusion, sorrow, but couldn't put words to them. Frank's eyes narrowed as he stared at the man he once considered a neighbor. In that harrowing moment, Henry provided a number, a pitiful figure that felt like a cornerstone for all his guilt and shame. He accepted the cash, the weight of the bills heavy in his hands, and as he turned to leave, he didn't glance back. The sight of his daughter standing there, a tiny, perfect soul, was unbearable. Lily watched her father walk away, heart pounding, a sense of loss engulfing her. She signed, tears brimming in her eyes, but he didn't turn around, not this time. Days turned into weeks at the ranch, transforming Lily's world into something harsh and unrecognizable. Frank saw her as just another unskilled worker, believing her to be mute and incapable. He shouted, barking orders without ever stopping to see the spirit that resided in her. To the men, she was merely a tool, someone to help with the mundane tasks that filled the long hours of ranch life. At first, Lily felt like a shadow, the silence around her suffocating. Yet as time wore on, something remarkable happened. She began to feel the vibrations of the world around her, the rumble of hooves, the rustle of grass, the murmurs of life that danced just beyond her reach. Each sound bled into her consciousness like colors filling a vivid painting. Then one evening, while the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting golden hues across the fields, Lily overheard Frank speaking to another ranch hand. "If that man thinks I'm going to keep bending over for him, he's got another thing coming," he said, voice tinged with frustration. Lily felt her heart skip, her senses awakening in a rush. She focused intently on those words, and suddenly the echoes coalesced into meaning. She wasn't just feeling the vibrations, she was understanding something deeper and more profound. With newfound confidence, she dove headfirst into ranch life. No longer overwhelmed, she transformed her solitude into strength. The tasks that had once seemed insurmountable became challenges she met with determination. She helped tend to the cattle expertly and learned to navigate through the chaos surrounding her. Slowly but surely, the men began to notice her resilience. They shifted their perceptions, recognizing that she was more than just a silent girl, she was a fierce, capable worker. However, beneath her growing strength, Lily still grappled with missing her father. The memory of her life before echoed through her, a bittersweet reminder of love and abandonment. She held on to the hope that maybe one day he would return, that he would come to see her in this new world she now inhabited. Meanwhile, Henry sat in his lonely world, battling the ongoing weight of regret and guilt. He mumbled to himself, his reflection haunting him from the mirror. The liquor had temporarily dulled the pain, but the reality of his decision clawed at his conscience. In a drunken haze, he returned to the ranch, desperation urging his feet forward. He needed to see her again. Time had not softened his feelings, rather it had intensified his regret. Lily heard her father's voice before she could see him, and for a moment hope sparked within her like a flicker of light. She asked tentatively, rushing toward the sound. Henry demanded, eyes wild with urgency. Frank stood firm, a protective wall between the two, contempt mixing with concern. "I need to apologize," Henry said, his voice shaky. "I made a horrible mistake." But before Frank could respond, Lily emerged from the shadows, her spirit shining like sunlight cutting through the clouds. She signed, rushing into his arms, the warmth of her small body grounding him. For a moment, time stood still. Henry knelt, overwhelmed by the rush of emotions, guilt wrapping around him like a noose. "I'm so sorry, Lily. I didn't know what I was doing." Lily stepped back, looking his eyes, filled with a blend of hurt and understanding. "It's okay, Dad. I'm strong now. I can hear." Henry's heart raced. "You can hear?" "Yeah," she exclaimed, joy radiating from her. The world opened up before him, the silence around them dissolving into a landscape of shared dreams and hopes. Frank watched, bewildered as the two shared a moment so charged with emotion it sent ripples through the air. He could feel the love that sparked between them burn away the shadows of separation. But before they could fully embrace, a distant rumble of thunder echoed in the sky, casting a foreboding chill that crept through the atmosphere. The clouds rolled in swiftly, dark and heavy, mirroring the weight of their past. Just as Henry opened his mouth to speak, a deafening clap of thunder shook the ground beneath them, startling everyone. The wind picked up, whipping around them, stirring a tempest that seemed to echo the storm brewing inside Henry. "No," he shouted over the chaos, desperation clinging to his words, but Lily only shook her head, glancing at the sky, anxious anticipation flooding her. She signed, fear mingling with excitement. In that moment, Henry realized it wasn't just an apology he needed to make, it was a concession to face the truth of his actions. The storm outside mirrored the struggle within him, a tapestry of unresolved emotions woven tightly together. As drops of rain began to fall, heavy and relentless, the three of them rushed toward the barn where safety awaited. But beyond the sanctuary of that barn lay a world filled with uncertainties, questions, and fears that hung thick in the air. And just as they reached the wooden doors, thunder roared above them, prompting Lily to pause. "Dad, I can't be afraid anymore." With a flood of emotion and the pounding of rain matching the rhythm of his heart, Henry turned to face her. "I promise I'll do whatever it takes to make it right, Lily." As they sealed themselves inside the barn, the storm raged on as a powerful metaphor, turbulent swirls of weather aligning with their tumultuous journey. But deep down, Henry realized something vital. The battle wasn't just against the storm outside, but the tempest that raged within each of them. As the barn creaked with the weight of thunder and the flickers of lightning illuminated their faces, the heavy truth began to settle into their hearts. It was not only a fight for survival against a raging storm, but a struggle for redemption, understanding, and a chance for a new beginning. With the sound of pouring rain cascading onto the roof, they prepared to confront the revelations that would test them all in ways they never imagined. Would the unraveling of their separate lives strengthen the ties that bound them as a family, or would it tear them apart forever? In that moment of uncertainty, they stood together, united but still fragile, ready to face whatever came next. And deep down, they all knew that their journey was only just beginning, with the echoes of the past and the storms of the present converging into an uncertain future that awaited them outside.